10 years of Hamas rule in Gaza, the Israeli blockade has increasingly isolated the group, and the recent softening of its image hasn't loosened the grip. What are the risks of squeezing Hamas further, and is reconciliation possible with the Palestinian president? This is Inside Story. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Darine Abu Gheda. Hamas is a source of controversy at home in Gaza, in Israel and the occupied West Bank, the Arabian Peninsula, and over the Atlantic in the US. So the 10th anniversary of Hamas's rule in Gaza was on Wednesday. For much of the last decade, Hamas leaders have been at odds with rival political party Fatah and the Palestinian Authority in the occupied West Bank. Hamas's leaders announced a change in their charter at a conference in Qatar last month. The new document distances Hamas from the Muslim Brotherhood and more closely aligns the group somewhat with the objectives of the Palestinian Authority.
Hamas considers the establishment of a Palestinian state sovereign and complete on the basis of the June 4th, 1967, with Jerusalem as its capital, and the provision for all the refugees to return to their homeland is an agreeable form that has won the consensus among the movement members.
Well, a lot has happened between Hamas and the Palestinian Authority over the past 10 years. So Hamas won the 2006 election and solidified its hold on Gaza a year later, when the rival Fatah movement and leaders of the Palestinian Authority were forced out after days of violence. The Hamas-Fatah rift has run deep ever since, despite several failed attempts at reconciliation. Each time, the plan to form a unity government has fallen apart. The two sides met most recently in Moscow in January and agreed to form a national council. Some say the deal signals the Palestinians looking to Russia instead of the US as a peace broker. Well, many people in Gaza say the Hamas-Fatah rift has had a tangible impact on their lives. Listen.
As a civilian, I feel frustrated after 10 years of Palestinian division. I graduated from university 3 years ago and still can't find work, can't plan for marriage. The division killed any hope for a good future. I wish I could leave Gaza and live somewhere else.
I consider the division as a black spot in our history. Many crises resulted from it, including the Israeli siege, unemployment, 3 wars, and other crises because of the division.
I was 12 when the division first began, but as I grew, I began to realize how bad our Palestinian society is. The economic situation is catastrophic. My dreams and hopes have been dashed after many failures. They kept telling us things would improve. I hope they can reach reconciliation, and I dream of a unified Palestinian state.
Let's bring in our guest joining us from Beirut, Osama Hamdan. He's the Hamas spokesman and member of Hamas Politburo in Ramallah. Mustafa Barghouti, he's the Secretary General of the Palestinian National Initiative and also former Palestinian Information Minister. In Istanbul, Ahmed Alburai, he's a political columnist and lecturer at Istanbul Aydin University. Welcome to all of you. Osama Hamdan, 10 years of divisions, 10 years of disunity and splits between Hamas and Fatah. Would you say that reconciliation now is further apart than ever before?
Well, thank you for having me. I have to say that it's 10 years of the coup which took place by Abu Mazen and Fatah against the democratic process in Palestine. We have done our best to achieve a reconciliation. We don't need more documents. We have signed all the documents to achieve this reconciliation, but everyone knows that it's in the hands of Abu Mazen, who undermined the whole process. He undermined all the efforts which was done by the Egyptians and the Qataris and some other countries in order to achieve the agreement. In fact, we have a complete agreement for the reconciliation. We want this agreement to be implemented. From our side, we are ready to do that. But the big question is whether Abu Mazen is ready to front the Israeli pressure, or he will accept the Israeli pressure and continue the process by undermining the whole situation.
Here's the thing, Osama Hamdan, the UN humanitarian coordinator for the occupied Palestinian territories, that's Robert Piper. He's saying that the people in Gaza should not be held hostage to this long-standing internal Palestinian dispute. Do you at least acknowledge that the people in Gaza are the ones that are suffering because of internal divisions? They are the ones that are being held hostage?
Well, we are the people who are suffering in Gaza. We are the people who are under the pressure and the siege in Gaza. And it's clear from the last few weeks that Abu Mazen is behind the siege. He was the one who asked the Israelis to cut off the electricity. He was the one who asked the Israelis to cut off the water from Gaza. And he is encouraging everyone to attack Gaza. That was clear in his role in the war against Gaza in 2008 when he formed a committee to coordinate with the Israeli troops against Gaza. So if we want to talk about hostages, we are not talking about Hamas. Hamas and the Palestinians in Gaza, they are under the siege by the Israelis, supported by Abu Mazen. And this is the main problem. Yes, there is a siege which no one can accept or believe it's happening in this century against the Palestinians in Gaza.
Okay, Mustafa Barghouti, you hear Osama Hamdan blaming Abu Mazen, the Palestinian Authority, President Mahmoud Abbas, for what's going on in Gaza. Can you weigh in on that and tell me whether you think conditions today are worse off or better off than they were 10 years ago when it comes to reconciliation?
I remember that day very well because at that time we had national unity government, by the way, and not Hamas government. And that national unity government included Fatah, Hamas, us, the National Initiative, Democratic Front, People's Party, and many independents. It actually represented 96% of the elected people in the Palestinian parliament. That government, which was a solution to the split between Hamas and Fatah, lasted only 86 days. Why? Because Israel boycotted, tried to break it down. The United States put it under siege. Most European countries followed the United States. So the world community was responsible in listening to Israel and boycotting the national unity government. I might understand, although I would not agree with their boycott of Hamas government because of their differences, but I don't understand why they proceeded with boycotting even the national unity government, which I personally was a mediator in creating. We thought with national unity government, we will continue our work and everybody will be together, and that was the best solution to the Palestinian people that would have guaranteed the continuation of democracy. Unfortunately, we were put under siege, purposeful siege that led to the split of that government and the establishment of a serious division between West Bank and Gaza. Let me say that what we lost is not only the unity, we lost democracy, we lost separation of powers, we lost the parliament. And what we have today is two executive authorities, one in West Bank, one in Gaza. Both of them are one-party rule, functioning and struggling with each other under occupation.
Okay, so when it comes to today, do you believe that Fatah wants to reconcile with Hamas? Osama Hamdan is saying that Hamas is willing to reconcile. Do you believe that Fatah wants to do so?
I believe that if both parties have the will, we can achieve unity tomorrow. Mr. Hamdan is correct about one specific thing, that we met in Beirut and then we met in Moscow and we had a full agreement. We didn't need even to recreate reconciliation agreement because we already have enough agreements. And we met in Moscow. We agreed on forming a national unity government again. We agreed on reconvening the Palestinian National Legislative Council. We agreed on establishing a new date for elections, which we did not have since 2006. And we agreed that Hamas and Jihad would join the PLO, and this way we can have a unified national leadership. None of that was implemented because of two factors. One factor is internal Palestinian, which is dominant, unfortunately, where there is no readiness for sharing power with each other. And the second factor is external interventions, including Israel, including the United States, including many other countries who are trying to prevent Palestinians from getting unified. The outcome is not only the split between West Bank and Gaza, the outcome is that this split is weakening us. The main people who are suffering are the Palestinian people in Gaza, who are suffering, as you have said, from terrible humanitarian crisis. They have been under siege for 10 years. We should not forget or ignore the Israeli hands in all this matter, and we should not devote most of our energy in fighting with each other. We should concentrate on the cause, and the cause here is Israel that does not want to see a free Palestinian state.
Ahmed Alburai, many attempts, as you're hearing, at reconciliation in the past decades. What needs to happen for it to actually stick?
It's not about the political will, as Dr. Barouti is saying. I do believe that the plight the Palestinians are living is still to continue, and we are not going to find any kind of reconciliation between both parties simply because they don't have the exact common ground to work on. Hamas, on the one hand, believes in the military resistance against the occupation, while Abu Mazen and Fatah, the PLO, they believe in the popular resistance or the peaceful negotiation, the process of peace negotiation forever. So the point is to bring these two parties together is to some extent implicable, is to some extent impossible, and I don't believe that it's the Hamas movement from the one hand that is not going to succumb what they already gained after the takeover of Gaza in 2006, and Abu Mazen is not going to forgive what they have deprived him from the Gaza Strip. So it's mainly the 2006 that was the turning point in the relationship between both of them. Abu Mazen wants to go back exactly to before 2006, which is for Hamas impossible, and Hamas wants Abu Mazen to offer something more. Like they want him to offer the salaries of their own employees, more than 50,000 employees in the Gaza Strip. They want him to recognize the employees in Gaza. They want him to support the power plant in the Gaza Strip. And they want him to let him control the border with Egypt, to practice more pressure on the neighboring countries, where Abu Mazen believe that it's a punishment to Hamas that committed a coup, according to him, against him and his legitimacy in 2006. So this impasse, this deadlock is going to continue as far as these two political agendas cannot meet in a common ground.
Osama Hamdan, this deadlock, as well as the blockade on Gaza, as well as the suffering of your people in Gaza, how much pressure is it putting on Hamas?
Well, I have to say that the political deadlock was, in fact, solved, or at least we tried to solve it by signing the national document, which was known the prisoners' document, in 2006, which agreed that everyone in Palestine, all the Palestinian organizations, accept that the national program is to achieve a Palestinian state on the lines of the 4th of June, independent sovereign state with Jerusalem as a capital and the right and the return of all the refugees. So we tried to find a solution for the political deadlock, which Abu Mazen did not work with. According to the siege, I have to say that the sufferness of the Palestinian people in Gaza is very difficult and it's very tough. That includes Hamas and Hamas members. But we have also to say that we want to solve this problem not on the behalf of the Palestinians for another time.
But how much pressure is this all putting on Hamas when the United Nations comes out and says there are disastrous consequences coming up of a further reduction in electricity supply to Gaza, which we now know is taking place? This must make Hamas really feel the heat.
Well, I think the one who is supposed to be blamed for this siege is the United Nations and the international community, because they put the Palestinians under the siege the next day after the elections. They did not like the results of the elections. They expected Abu Mazen and Fatah will win the elections, but for their shock, Hamas won the elections, and this is against their will. So they tried to put all the Palestinians under the siege. This is the problem. If we want to solve the siege, someone have to change his position. They want the Palestinians to give up, or they have to understand that the Palestinians will continue the struggle until they will achieve their national goals. This is the point. If the siege is against Hamas, if the siege is against Hamas, they have to punish Hamas only, not to punish 2 million Palestinians, not to punish the Palestinians in Jerusalem, for example, also, not also to put the Palestinians in West Bank under the pressure every time. I have to say all the Palestinians under the pressure, maybe in Gaza it's more difficult, more tough, but in fact, we all as Palestinians under the occupation, and if we want to get rid of this siege, we have to talk about an end for this occupation who creates all the problems for the Palestinians.
Mustafa Barghouti, Hamas is, though, the reality is it's facing a new and harsh reality considering there's a GCC rift going on right now between Qatar and several Gulf countries. How do you think the GCC rift affects Hamas?
Well, I hope it doesn't, and I hope these fights between the Arab countries end as soon as possible because they serve only one interest, which is Israel. Israel wants to destroy every power in the region. It wants to have the supremacy of control politically, militarily, economically. And the sooner the Arabs realize that, the better for all of them. But let me go back to one statement that was made by your guest in Turkey. I do not think that the difference between Fatah and Hamas is about the program anymore. Hamas, as was just said, accepted two-state solution on the basis of 67 borders. Hamas said they are respecting the ceasefire in Gaza, and they say they want to practice popular resistance. There is a difference between us, Hamas, and many other Palestinian parties about engaging in negotiations while there is such an imbalance of power. And that's what we disagree with the authority about. But I don't think the programmatic aspect is the main problem today. I think, unfortunately, the main problem is that there is a fight over power, over an authority, over people, while both authorities in West Bank and Gaza are under Israeli occupation. The problem is the inability to accept the principle of sharing power and the inability to accept the principles of democracy and democratic representation. The Palestinian people has become the victim. People have been deprived from the right of choosing their leaders for more than 10 years. Elections are not taking place, and the outcome is this fight, which is hurting the future of Palestinian people.
Ahmed Alburai, are the factors that have allowed Hamas to keep its momentum over the years sufficient today in the face of changing regional dynamics, especially the rift between the Gulf countries and where Qatar stands when it comes to Hamas?
Yeah, that's the point I wanted to make. Whenever we just throw the blame on Abu Mazen and Israel, and Hamas is not holding any kind of blame. What happened at the time of Mohammed Morsi, he was in Egypt as the Muslim Brotherhood leader. Hamas has the leverage at that time, and they could have a real reconciliation where they have the upper hand with Abu Mazen. But they refrained from this because they think that the time is their own time, and it's not time of Abu Mazen and Fatah movement to make more concessions. That was on the one hand. So both parties, whenever they have the support of the international community, they believe that they do have the leverage against the other party. They don't care about the reconciliation. Now what we're having is Abu Mazen is in a stalemate, in a dilemma, because he doesn't know how to satisfy Trump from the one hand and how to satisfy the Arab world. I just bring back the David Hurst article at the Middle East Eye when he speak about the succession of Abu Mazen, the other one about Hamas when he spoke about the Hamas is going to Hajj while everybody is going back, speaking about the two-state solution. So it's not the time you make concessions when they're not there anymore. Abu Mazen now knows that he has a real problem with the international community that does not not look for him as a legitimate representative of the Palestinians. They are looking for his successor from the one hand, and for Hamas from the other hand, they do understand that's what's happening in the region is something not in their favor. It's completely against their will.
Well, let's put that to Osama Hamdan. Is what's happening in the region not in the favor of Hamas, Osama Hamdan? And when there are calls on Qatar to cut support to Hamas, if it wants to restore diplomatic relations with some of the other countries that cut diplomatic relations, does that worry you at all?
Well, I have to start first with what your guest in Turkey is saying. During the presidency of President Morsi, in fact, we offered Abu Mazen and we insist to implement the reconciliation agreement which was signed in 2009. And we did not intend to make any changes. And we told Abu Mazen in a direct meeting, we are not willing to make any changes. We want to implement the agreement as it was signed during the presidency of Mr. Mubarak. So we did not work to have the leverage because we understand well that the unity of the Palestinians is more important than having leverage against Fatah or any other Palestinian organization. In fact, we believe in sharing and unity because we are all facing the occupation. And this is the position which Abu Mazen is under it now. Abu Mazen, he thought for a while that if he pleased Trump or the United States administration, that will help him against Hamas. In fact, it's not. Going back to your question, in fact, any internal Arab problem will affect the Palestinian cause, not only Hamas. It will affect the Palestinian cause. The weak in the body of the Arabs.
But I'd like to know from you how this particularly affects Hamas, seeing that Hamas is brought up as a core condition in this issue.
Well, in fact, we believe we have all the time worked under tough and hard conditions. Even in the good days, there was tough and hard conditions. This is the equation of the resistance against the occupation. I believe the better thing now is to solve the Arab problems rather than using the struggle with the Israelis and those problems. I believe that the Arabs are supposed to reconcile internally, and this will help the Palestinians more and more. For Hamas, we know who is supporting the Palestinian cause exactly. We know who is supporting the Palestinians and helping the Palestinians more, and who is using that as a slogan, and we will not forget that. But also we are willing to have this support from all the Arab countries, from all the Arab governments. And this is what we are seeking to see, and this is what we are seeking to have.
In fact, Mustafa Barghouti, Hamas tried to do that in their new charter. They said that they recognize a relationship with Arab governments is necessary to ensure the freedom of movement for Palestinians. But that better relationship clearly hasn't happened, not only with Arab governments, but you had the U.S. President Donald Trump labeling Hamas a terrorist organization, Saudi Arabia recently calling it extremist. So this all doesn't bode well for Hamas.
Well, it doesn't go well for Palestinian people. I've warned recently in an article that if you accept describing one part of the Palestinian national movement, including Hamas, as terrorist, then this will affect the whole Palestinian national movement, and sooner or later Fatah will suffer from that. We can see that Netanyahu is so aggressive; he will not save nobody, and he will be going after every organization, not only Hamas. So in my opinion, we should completely reject this description of Palestinian people who are struggling for their freedom. We should not accept this pressure to cut the financial and social support to families of prisoners and families of martyrs who sacrificed their life and their freedom for the freedom of their own people. And accepting these pressures will not lead to anywhere. We have to realize that the main problem today is the imbalance of power between us and Israel. And any Palestinian leader who wants to see a good future for his people must put all efforts today in achieving internal unity and internal reconciliation, because this is the main factor that could stop this bleeding internally and that could help regain the balance of power between us and Israel. Without that, pleasing the United States, pleasing the international community will bring nothing if one cannot please his own people. This is a very important point. And by the way, there should be this defensive approach in front of the Israelis is unacceptable. One has to ask the question, why Israel is still supporting the family of Baruch Goldstein, for instance, who committed a massacre in the Palestinian Ibrahimi Mosque against Palestinians who were praying. Why is he receiving, his family is receiving support from the Israeli government?
Okay.
Nobody is asking these questions.
Dr. Barghouti, I'm afraid I'll have to jump in there because we've run out of time. Thank you very much to all of my guests for joining us. Osama Hamdan, Mustafa Barghouti, and Ahmed Alburai. And thank you for watching. You can see the program again anytime by visiting our website, aljazeera.com. For further discussion, go to our Facebook page. That's facebook.com/AJ Inside Story. Join the conversation on Twitter. Our handle is @AJ Inside Story. From myself, the whole team here in Doha, goodbye for now.